My daughter looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're useless now, Mom. Find somewhere else to die." Those words didn't just break my heart, they buried it. I packed my life into 2 old suitcases and left the home I'd built for 42 years. The same home my husband and I had poured every dream into. 3 days later, sitting inside a downtown law office with shaking hands, I found out the truth. My late husband, Charles Whitmore, had outsmarted them all. The daughter who threw me away had just lost everything. And the woman she called useless, she was about to become the most powerful person in the family. My story isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about karma, family, and a kind of revenge money can't buy. So before we dive in, hit subscribe, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Because what you're about to hear might just change the way you look at family forever. When my daughter told me to find somewhere else to die, something inside me cracked so loudly, I swear the air changed. I didn't scream, I didn't beg, I just froze. The words hung in the room like the smell of burnt toast, bitter, unforgettable, impossible to take back. I packed my bags in silence that night, my fingers trembling as I folded the last traces of my life into 2 worn-out suitcases. 42 years of love, duty, and sacrifice, reduced to fabric, photos, and fading memories. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you raised, someone you would have died for, tell me where you're watching from, because I want you to know this story is for you. It's strange how quiet a home feels when it's no longer yours. The walls that once carried laughter suddenly feel like witnesses, staring, but saying nothing. The smell of Charles's cologne still clung to the curtains, the faint echo of his voice hiding in the corners. My husband had been gone for barely 2 months, yet somehow I was the one being buried alive. Vanessa came that morning looking like she was starring in her own victory parade. Hair perfect, nails sharp. Her husband Ethan behind her, carrying a clipboard like he was managing a merger instead of dismantling a family. "Mom," she began with that soft, polished voice, "we've made a decision." Those 4 words, "we've made a decision," were the calm before the storm that would tear everything I had left apart. Ethan didn't look at me as he wheeled in their luggage. He didn't need to. The arrogance said everything. "We'll be moving in starting this week. It just makes sense with my promotion. Closer to the city, better schools for the kids, and well," he trailed off, smiling. I blinked. Moving into what? Vanessa's smile widened, the kind of smile wolves wear right before they bite. "Into this house, Mom. Dad left it to me." My throat went dry. "That's not possible." She held up a piece of paper like it was the 10 Commandments. "Actually, it is. According to Dad's will, everything, the house, the investments, the accounts, it's all mine." Everything slowed. My ears rang. My fingers went numb. I whispered, "You're joking." "No joke," she said, tilting her head. "Dad knew I'd take better care of his legacy. You were always emotional about money. You were just the wife." I had cooked his meals, nursed his fevers, balanced every checkbook, stretched every dollar. I was the one who made his world run. And now, my own daughter was repeating his words like scripture. You ever felt your heart shatter so quietly that even you can't hear it? That's what it felt like. "Vanessa," I said, trying to breathe, "please." She cut me off. "Mom, I'm not your enemy, but it's time to face reality. You can't live here alone. It's too big, too old, and honestly, it's not safe for you. I've lived here my entire life. And now it's my turn." Her words sliced through me like glass. I wish I could tell you I fought, that I screamed, tore up the papers, demanded proof. But I didn't, because in that moment, I believed her. I believed my own child wouldn't lie to me about something so cruel. Have you ever trusted someone so deeply that even when the knife was in your back, you still couldn't believe they were the one holding it? If you know that feeling, hit the like button, because that's exactly where I was. They gave me 3 hours. 3 hours to gather 42 years of living. While I packed, Vanessa leaned against the doorway, scrolling through her phone, glancing at her watch like I was making her late for something. Ethan busied himself outside, making calls, talking about ownership transfers and maintenance crews. Every photo I placed in that box felt like a funeral. Every item I folded reminded me of a woman who'd given everything and was now being quietly erased. When I was done, Vanessa walked me to the car like I was a housemaid finishing her last shift. "There's a nice senior complex on Birch Street," she said cheerfully. "Affordable and quiet, you'll love it." She was inheriting $36 million, and she wanted me in a government-subsidized retirement home. Ethan loaded my suitcases into their Lexus with mechanical efficiency, like he'd done this before. Maybe he had. "Mom," Vanessa said, tucking her hair behind her ear, "don't make this harder than it has to be. Dad trusted me with everything. He knew you struggle without guidance." Guidance, that's what she called throwing me out of my own house. I smiled weakly. "Thank you for your kindness." She kissed my cheek, cold, perfunctory, hollow, and said, "I'll transfer some money into your account once we get things sorted." Once we get things sorted. Not you, never you. The drive to Pineview Inn was silent. Ethan kept his eyes on the road. I stared out the window, watching the home I built, my home, disappear in the rearview mirror. When we reached the motel, he handed me $200. "This should help until we transfer the funds." I wanted to scream. Instead, I said, "Thank you, Ethan." He nodded awkwardly. "Take care, Elaine." They drove away. I stood on the cracked sidewalk, clutching those bills like they were my last breath. The Pineview Inn smelled like cheap soap and broken promises. The walls were yellowed from years of neglect, and the air conditioner made a noise like it was choking. I placed my suitcases on the floor, sat on the sagging mattress, and stared at the wall until it blurred. It's funny, I used to believe rock bottom was losing my husband. Turns out, rock bottom was realizing my daughter didn't care. If you've ever helped raise someone who later looked at you like you were disposable, type, "I understand" in the comments. I want to see how many hearts out there have been broken by their own blood. I sat there that night, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles like time mocking me. My mind kept replaying the same moment, Vanessa's voice, calm and confident, saying, "You're useless now." I whispered back into the empty room, "Maybe I am." But something deep, buried, quiet whispered back, "Not yet." The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. Charles had always been meticulous, obsessive, even. Every document filed, every receipt labeled. He'd shown me his will once years ago. Back then, it said everything would go to me. The house, the assets, the accounts. So why would he change that? I took the crumpled motel notepad from the bedside table and wrote one name I could still trust. Richard Bloom, Charles's lawyer. The man who handled everything from our mortgage to our insurance. It cost me $3 to catch the morning bus into Charleston. $3 and a trembling kind of courage. The city looked different that day, brighter, faster, like it had moved on without me. I walked into Richard's office clutching my purse like a shield. When he saw me, his face softened. "Elaine, my goodness, I was starting to worry. Vanessa said you were traveling." Traveling? My own daughter had told him I'd left town. "Richard," I said, "I need to ask you something about Charles's will." He frowned. "Didn't Vanessa give you your copy? I handed her the original." I felt my stomach twist. There was a reading. "Of course there was," he said. "Vanessa told us you were too emotional to attend." I gripped the edge of the desk. "Richard, she told me she inherited everything, that I got nothing." He froze. His expression changed from confusion to disbelief, then to anger. "That's not true." He pulled open a drawer, flipping through a thick file until he found the latest copy of Charles's will. He laid it flat on the desk and read aloud. "To my beloved wife, Elaine Margaret Whitmore, I leave 70% of all financial assets and our home at 510 Laurel Drive." I blinked. 70%. Yes, that's about $25 million plus the house. And to Vanessa Clark, $11 million, held in trust until her 45th birthday. contingent upon her treatment of her mother. The room started to spin. My breath caught. "Richard," I whispered. "She lied. She threw me out." He leaned forward, his voice hard now. "Elaine, what your daughter did is criminal. Fraud, elder abuse, identity misrepresentation. You need to let me handle this immediately." I sat there shaking. My daughter had stolen everything from me, and in doing so, had destroyed her own future. Richard picked up the phone and called the bank. Within minutes, everything Vanessa thought she owned, every account, every card, every penny was frozen. As I listened, a slow, dangerous calm settled over me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the obedient wife or the forgiving mother. I was the woman my daughter underestimated. By the time I left that office, I knew one thing for sure. Vanessa was about to learn what happens when you try to bury someone who taught you how to dig. So before we move to what came next, have you subscribed yet? Because trust me, you'll want to see how this unfolds. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if your own child stole your home? The morning after I found out the truth, I woke up in that cramped motel room feeling something I hadn't felt in months: purpose. The kind that sits in your chest and burns slow, like a fuse waiting to reach the flame. I sat on that old mattress staring at the wall, clutching Charles's will in my shaking hands. It was real. I wasn't crazy. My husband had protected me, and my daughter had destroyed herself trying to steal what was already mine. You know that feeling when betrayal turns into fuel, when sadness starts to taste like steel. That's exactly where I was. I looked at myself in the cracked bathroom mirror. Puffy eyes, wrinkled skin, but behind them, a spark. For 42 years, I'd lived as someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's shadow. But not anymore. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. I want to know how many people out there have ever had to rebuild themselves from the ashes someone else lit. The motel manager, a thin man with tobacco-stained fingers, gave me a look when I came down for coffee. "Rough night?" he asked. I smiled weakly. "You could say that." He slid a styrofoam cup across the counter. "You staying long?" "Not if I can help it." He nodded like he'd heard that before, because he had. People didn't come to Pineview Inn to start over. They came because they had nowhere left to go. But that wasn't going to be my story. By noon, I'd returned to Richard's office. I still couldn't believe what was happening. The same man who'd once called me too fragile to handle paperwork now looked at me like a general preparing for war. "Elaine," he said, "I've already spoken with Detective Ruiz. We're opening a case file for fraud, identity forgery, and elder abuse. You'll need to make an official statement." The words elder abuse stung. I wasn't old. I was alive. And I was done being underestimated. We spent the afternoon making copies, signing documents, gathering everything I could remember: dates, conversations, text messages. I even showed him the crumpled receipt for the motel room. "This," he said, tapping it, "is proof. She evicted you under false pretenses. That's coercion." Coercion. Such a clinical word for something so personal. I left his office around 4, stepping into the golden light of downtown Charleston. The air smelled like magnolias and diesel fumes. I felt alive again, standing in a world that no longer pitied me. I had no idea that this was just the beginning. That night, as I sat on the motel bed, I kept replaying every conversation I'd ever had with Vanessa. The subtle manipulation. The fake concern. The way she'd said, "Our house," after Charles's funeral. Our house. She'd been planning this for weeks, maybe months. I looked at my phone, 17 missed calls, all from her. I didn't answer. Instead, I turned the phone face down, leaned back against the headboard, and whispered, "Let her panic." I think that's when the shift happened, when pain stopped controlling me and strategy took its place. The next morning at exactly 3:47 p.m., the phone rang again. This time I answered. "Mom," her voice was tight, almost trembling. "There's some kind of issue with the bank accounts. They're saying everything's frozen." I smiled to myself. Yes, I imagine that must be confusing. What's going on? Did you do something? I did what your father would have wanted. I spoke to his lawyer. Silence, then a gasp. You what? I discovered the real will, darling. The one that leaves everything, and I do mean everything, to me. She tried to steady her voice. Mom, you're confused. Someone's lying to you. I was protecting you from stress, from legal things you wouldn't understand. I laughed softly. Vanessa, I've spent my life managing things your father never noticed. Bills, repairs, birthdays, pain. Don't tell me what I can't understand. Mom, you're being manipulated. No, sweetheart, you're the one who did the manipulating. You forged documents. You lied to a lawyer. You threw your mother out of her own home. Mom, please, let's talk. We can fix this. Oh, we'll talk, I said. But not on the phone. You can discuss this with Detective Ruiz when he arrives. If you're still watching right now, tell me honestly, what would you have done in my shoes? Would you forgive her? Or would you let karma do its job? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to see how many of you believe blood excuses betrayal. By 8:20 that night, Karma came knocking with handcuffs. Richard called me the moment it happened. They arrested her during dinner at the Velvet Room, he said, unable to hide the satisfaction in his voice. I closed my eyes, imagining it, Vanessa sitting at a candlelit table, maybe raising a glass of wine, believing she'd won. And then the police walking in, her face paling, her world collapsing. It wasn't joy I felt, it was justice. Ethan was picked up the next morning at his office. Turns out he wasn't just her partner in marriage, he was her partner in crime. His company had forged documents before. He knew exactly how to fake a will. The news spread fast. Small towns love scandal, and Charleston was no exception. Prominent banker and wife arrested for defrauding elderly mother. That headline made front-page news. I sat in the motel lobby, watching the TV, sipping cheap coffee, trying to feel something other than relief. And then it hit me, relief was the feeling. For the first time in months, I could breathe again. Have you ever been so hurt that healing feels like guilt? Like you're not supposed to feel okay yet? That's what it was. The next day, I went home. My home. Walking up that familiar driveway felt like stepping back into my own skin. The front door was locked, but the key still worked. When I pushed it open, the smell of Vanessa's perfume hit me, sweet, expensive, and suffocating. The living room looked like a magazine spread. She'd redecorated already. My photos were gone, my curtains replaced. It didn't look like home anymore. It looked like a stranger's showroom. I walked upstairs, heart pounding. The master bedroom was unrecognizable. My side of the closet, empty. Charles's side, rearranged. She'd even moved her jewelry onto my vanity. That was the moment I stopped crying for her. You can't grieve someone who's still alive, but chose to kill what you meant to them. I took a deep breath and said aloud, "This ends today." By noon, I was back at Richard's office. "Freeze everything," I told him. "Accounts, titles, transfers. I want every record sealed until the investigation ends." He nodded, already done. And then he said something that changed everything. "Elaine, there's a clause in your husband's will you should know about." "A clause?" "Yes. It says if Vanessa fails to treat you with dignity and respect, her entire share reverts to you. Which means..." I finished his sentence for him. "Which means she's just given me her 11 million. Richard smiled. "You're not inheriting 25 million anymore. You're inheriting 36 plus the house." 36 million. I let the number settle, not because of greed, but because of the irony. The same greed that destroyed my daughter had just made me richer than she ever dreamed. I thought about calling her, but no, I wanted her to find out the same way I had, through the law. You ever notice how silence can be louder than words? That's what I wanted her to hear. By evening, she called again. This time, her voice wasn't angry, it was terrified. "Mom, please, they're saying everything gone. All the accounts, all the cards." "Yes," I said calmly. That's what happens when you build your empire on lies. Mom, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I sighed. That's the thing about greed, Vanessa. It doesn't have brakes. She started crying. Real tears this time. The kind that don't come from guilt, but from consequences. Mom, what's going to happen to us? I closed my eyes and whispered, exactly what you made happen to me. That night, I slept in my own bed for the first time in 42 years. And for the first time ever, it finally felt like mine. Before I drifted off, I whispered into the darkness. Charles, you protected me even in death. Thank you. And for anyone watching this right now, if you've ever been hurt by the people you loved the most, don't you dare let it define you. Subscribe, because what happens next will remind you. Sometimes revenge doesn't come with violence. It comes with paperwork, patience, and the perfect timing of karma itself. When I woke up the next morning, the house felt unfamiliar, like it was exhaling someone else's scent. The air still smelled faintly of Vanessa's perfume, that expensive sweetness that covered everything but meant nothing. I stood in the doorway of my old bedroom, sunlight streaming across the floorboards, and whispered, "He did it, Charles. You protected me." I should have felt peace. Instead, I felt something colder, sharper, the beginning of resolve. By 9 o'clock, I was back in Richard's office. He already had the coffee ready. "Detective Ruiz will meet us in 30 minutes, he said. "We're calling this Operation Justice." Operation Justice. The name made me smile for the first time in weeks. As we waited, I couldn't stop glancing at the thick folder on his desk. Every page of proof that my daughter had betrayed me. Text messages, bank transfers, even a fake property transfer agreement Ethan had drafted behind my back. Each document was a stab wound in ink form. I took a deep breath. Let's finish this. When Detective Ruiz arrived, she was nothing like I expected. She was tall, mid-40s maybe, her voice calm but her eyes sharp. The kind of woman who'd seen the worst of people and still believed in doing what's right. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "You've got courage. Not everyone comes forward when it's their own family." Courage. That word hit differently. It wasn't pity, it was respect. She sat across from me, flipping through the evidence. "Your daughter and son-in-law committed multiple crimes: forgery, fraud, financial coercion, elder abuse. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's organized manipulation." I nodded. They thought I was weak. Detective Ruiz smiled faintly. "That's what makes people like them sloppy." As she explained the next steps, the warrants, the subpoenas, the investigation, my fear started turning into something else. Purpose. For so long, I'd lived my life quietly, politely, always saying thank you, always forgiving. But forgiveness without accountability is just permission dressed up pretty. And I was done giving permission. By evening, the first calls had gone out. The bank confirmed the accounts were frozen. The police were preparing warrants. And for the first time since Charles's funeral, I slept without nightmares. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Richard. "Elaine, turn on Channel 9. I fumbled for the remote. The headline made me freeze. "Charleston couple arrested for elder fraud. Sources say victim is the wife's mother." The camera showed Vanessa being escorted into a police car, sunglasses hiding her face. Ethan followed behind, jaw clenched, pretending to be calm. My breath caught. I didn't want to cry, but I did. Not because I pitied her, but because she looked exactly like I once did, pretending to have control while her world collapsed. If you're still watching, tell me in the comments, what would you have felt in that moment? Relief, sadness, justice. Because I felt all three, swirling together like a storm I'd finally survived. Later that afternoon, Detective Ruiz called me. "They'll be booked within the hour," she said. "Now we begin the financial tracing." The tracing. Yes, we'll go through every account, every transfer. I'm also assigning a financial crimes specialist to help us connect the dots. "Who is she?" I asked. "Her name's Carolyn Tran. Smart, methodical, and ruthless in the best way. That name would come to mean everything in the days ahead. Carolyn arrived the next morning, petite, confident, the kind of woman who didn't waste words. She spread her laptop, recorder, and folders across my kitchen table. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'll be direct. Your husband's estate was more complex than it looked. These forged documents, they weren't created overnight." I frowned. "What are you saying?" She tapped the folder. "Someone inside Ethan's network helped. He had access to professionals, document specialists, financial channels. This wasn't desperation. It was planned." Planned. That word hit me like thunder. I'd believed Vanessa's betrayal was emotional, that she panicked, that grief twisted her judgment. But this was strategy. They were going to sell your house, transfer assets, and move the funds offshore, Carolyn continued. If you hadn't come forward, they'd have drained everything within weeks. I sat there frozen, staring at the papers that detailed my own destruction. She flipped another page. "There's something else. Your husband made updates to his will 6 months before his death, right after transferring a large sum into a private account. Do you remember that?" I shook my head slowly. "He never mentioned it." "It's not illegal," she said quickly. "Just unusual. The account's in your name, but it hasn't been touched. It contains approximately $1 million. My heart skipped. "In my name?" "Yes, almost as if he wanted to leave you something safe from interference." I sat there whispering. He knew. Charles had seen it coming. He'd known our daughter's weakness, her hunger for wealth, her sense of entitlement. He'd known she'd try to take what wasn't hers. "If you're still here, listening, I want to ask you something. Do you think parents can ever really know what their children are capable of? Drop your thoughts below, because after this, I stopped pretending mine was an angel." That evening, Richard called again. "Elaine, how are you holding up?" "I'm fine," I said, staring out the window at the quiet street. "Just thinking." "I have good news," he said. "The judge denied Vanessa's bail reduction request. She'll remain in custody until her arraignment." I nodded slowly. "And Ethan?" "His bail's set at $250,000. Apparently, the judge didn't like his history with fraudulent investment accounts." I sighed. "So it's true. He's been doing this for years." "Seems so." Silence filled the line. Then I said softly, "Richard, I want to renovate the house." He chuckled. "Already planning your next chapter, I see." "Not planning," I said, "reclaiming." The next morning, I went room by room, opening every window, letting sunlight chase away what they'd left behind. I packed Vanessa's designer clothes into garbage bags. Her perfumes, her shoes, her expensive makeup, all of it went to the porch. Let her collect them when she makes bail. The house breathed again. And for the first time, it felt like mine. Around noon, Carolyn returned. "There's something you should see." She laid down a series of printed emails between Ethan and a law firm, a private exchange where they discussed falsifying the will and hiding certain documents. They used my grief as camouflage. They planned it all down to the date of Charles's funeral. I sat back, my hands trembling, but not from fear anymore. From fury. "They thought I wouldn't notice," I said. Carolyn looked at me. "They thought you wouldn't fight." Fight. That word settled in my bones. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about reclaiming the part of me they'd buried, the part that still believed in my own power. That evening, the phone rang again. Vanessa's voice came through, weak and panicked. "Mom, I need your help, please. I can't stay here." I closed my eyes, listening to the same voice that once called me useless. "Help," I repeated. "Vanessa, you threw me into a motel." "I made mistakes. I was angry," Kevin said. "Don't blame him," I said quietly. "You knew what you were doing." She started sobbing. "Mom, please, think about the kids." "The kids," I whispered. "The ones you used as excuses while you stole my life." Silence. "I'll tell you what," I said calmly. "You'll get all the help you need from your lawyer. And when you stand in front of that judge, I hope you remember this moment. Mom. I placed the phone down, exhaled, and whispered to the quiet house. This is justice. But deep down, I knew the real storm hadn't started yet. Because sometimes, when you win a battle, life shows you a war you never knew existed. And my next discovery would change everything I thought I knew about Charles and about myself. Before we move into that part, take a second to subscribe if you haven't already, because the truth I found next. It didn't just rewrite my marriage. It redefined who I was. Tell me in the comments, what would you do if you discovered your family's betrayal was just the surface of something much darker? Because trust me, what came next made betrayal look like mercy. When I woke the next morning, the house was too quiet. No footsteps, no voices, just the hum of the refrigerator and the echo of my own thoughts. I poured coffee into Charles's old mug, the one with the chipped handle, and stared at his picture on the mantel. For the first time, I didn't see a husband. I saw a mystery. I'd won the battle against my daughter, but victory has a strange taste, sweet on the tongue, bitter in the throat. Because now that the storm had settled, questions started crawling out from underneath the calm. Why had Charles been so secretive the last year of his life? Why had he opened that hidden account? And why did Carolyn's voice sound worried when she said the word unusual? If you're still watching, tell me where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story's reaching, because what I'm about to tell you, I wouldn't believe if it hadn't happened to me. I spent the entire morning inside Charles's study, the one room I'd never truly entered after his death. It smelled like dust, cedar, and memory. Stacks of ledgers sat perfectly aligned on the shelves. Files labeled in his handwriting filled the cabinet's business accounts, partnerships, consulting fees. I once thought it was just paperwork. Now it felt like evidence. I started reading. At first, everything looked ordinary, meeting notes, invoices, client summaries. But then I found something odd, a folder labeled Legacy Trust Holdings. Inside were records of transfers, large, round numbers, to companies with names I didn't recognize. Each payment listed a memo, consulting retainer or advisory credit. They totaled millions. My stomach twisted. I whispered, "Charles, what were you doing?" I called Carolyn. She arrived within an hour, her laptop under her arm, expression tight. "Show me," she said. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she pulled up online databases, tracing each company name. Her face changed with every click. "These aren't consulting firms, Elaine," she said finally. "They're shells, paper companies. Someone been moving money through them for years." I felt my heart drop. "Are you saying my husband laundered money?" She hesitated. "We can't say that yet, but there's definitely something hidden here." I sank into Charles's chair. For decades, I thought I knew him better than anyone. Now I wasn't even sure what kind of man I'd married. If you've ever found out someone you loved had a secret life, type "I understand" in the comments. I need to know I'm not the only one who's ever had the ground disappear beneath them. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with the lights off, staring at the folder, the coffee gone cold in my hands. Every sound in the house made me jump, a pipe groaning, the clock ticking. The truth had weight now, and it was sitting right on my chest. Around midnight, Carolyn texted me. "We need to talk tomorrow. It's big." Those 3 words crawled under my skin. Morning came heavy. When she arrived, she didn't even take off her coat. "Elaine," she said, "I finished tracing the accounts. There's no easy way to say this. Charles was connected to a network that's been under federal surveillance for years. The money he moved wasn't his, it belonged to criminal clients." I blinked, trying to understand. Criminal. Organized crime, most likely. They used his firm as a cover. He disguised their transfers as consulting fees. I stood so quickly the chair scraped the floor. "That's impossible. He hated corruption. He coached ethics at church." "I know," she said softly. "That's what makes it so shocking." I felt dizzy. So all that money, the 36 million, is dirty. Possibly, but there's something stranger. 6 of those transfers were labeled informant retainer. That wording isn't normal for criminal bookkeeping. Informant. She nodded. That's why we need to involve federal authorities. If Charles was cooperating with them, it changes everything. I pressed my palms to my face. Half my life had been a lie, and yet somehow the truth might save me. Have you subscribed yet? Because you'll want to hear this next part. The part where I learned my husband wasn't the villain or the hero, but both. By afternoon, we were sitting in a conference room downtown. The woman across the table introduced herself as Agent Nina Alvarez from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. She listened quietly as Carolyn explained what we'd found. Then she looked straight at me. Mrs. Whitmore, your husband wasn't laundering money for criminals. He was laundering money with our knowledge. He was one of ours. My jaw dropped. What? For 12 years, Charles Whitmore acted as a deep-cover financial informant, she said. He reported every transaction to us. The funds he retained were authorized compensation. He helped us dismantle 3 money laundering networks. I couldn't speak. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the air conditioner. Agent Alvarez slid a folder toward me. Inside were photos of Charles shaking hands with agents, letters of commendation signed by officials, even copies of declassified reports bearing his initials. He never told me, I whispered. He couldn't, she said gently. His safety and yours depended on secrecy. Tears blurred my vision. So he wasn't a criminal. Far from it, he was one of the best assets we ever had. I looked at the ceiling, exhaling a laugh that was half sob. He really did play the longest game in history. Agent Alvarez nodded. But there's more. Your daughter and son-in-law attempted to exploit those hidden accounts. In doing so, they interfered with federal property. That elevates their charges to federal fraud and obstruction. I blinked through the tears. So their greed didn't just rob me, it exposed them to the FBI. Exactly. I wanted to laugh, cry, scream all at once. When I walked out of that office, sunlight hit my face like a blessing. For the first time, I understood that sometimes life doesn't give you neat justice. It gives you poetic symmetry. Vanessa had betrayed me for money that was never truly hers. And now, she was facing prison time for trying to steal from the U.S. government. That night, I poured a glass of wine and stood on the back porch, watching the sunset bleed across the sky. The cicadas hummed. The air smelled like rain. I whispered, "You won again, Charles." But even in victory, there was a sting. He'd protected me, yes, but he'd also hidden the truth so completely that I'd spent weeks believing I was nothing. Love built on secrets is still fragile. Still, I decided I'd rebuild on the ashes, but this time for me. If you're still here, drop a comment. Would you forgive someone who lied to protect you, even if it shattered your trust? Because forgiveness was the next battle I had to face, and it would be harder than any courtroom fight. Before I end this part, make sure you've subscribed. The next chapter of my story isn't about money or revenge. It's about confronting the ghosts that hide inside the truth. And trust me, when you hear what came after the FBI's revelation, you'll understand why I say the truth can be far more dangerous than lies. It's strange how silence can be louder than any argument. For weeks after the FBI's revelation, my house was full of that kind of silence, heavy, breathing, almost alive. The phone barely rang, the mail stopped coming, and the neighborhood whispers grew quieter but heavier. I could almost feel their stares when I walked outside. To them, I wasn't Elaine Whitmore, the woman who survived betrayal. I was the woman whose daughter went to prison. The headlines called it the Whitmore fraud case. Every time I saw my last name printed in black ink, I felt it burn. I hadn't done anything wrong, yet somehow I carried the shame. Because the truth is, when your child commits a crime, the world doesn't just blame them. It blames you. If you're still watching this, tell me where you're watching from. And tell me honestly, would you forgive your child if they destroyed your life? Because forgiveness sounds noble until you're the one standing in the wreckage. I thought I'd finally found peace. The FBI had cleared Charles's name, I had my home back, and Vanessa's sentence was certain. But peace doesn't last long when the past knows your number. It started with a letter. I found it wedged in my mailbox one morning, no return address, just my name written in Vanessa's delicate handwriting. I almost threw it away, but curiosity has a cruel way of disguising itself as closure. Inside, the first words punch me in the chest. Mom, please don't stop reading. I know I don't deserve your love, but I can't breathe in here. Ethan turned on me. He told the agents everything and left me to rot. I'm scared, Mom. Please, I need you. I read it 3 times. My hands were shaking by the end, but not from pity, from anger. Because even now, even trapped behind bars, she was still manipulating. Still playing victim. I tore the letter in half, then in half again. But that night, I couldn't sleep. Her words replayed in my head, crawling between the lines of my guilt. Was she truly scared? Or was she trying to pull me back into the web I'd finally escaped? Have you ever tried to stop loving someone who keeps hurting you? It's impossible. Love doesn't switch off, it erodes, one heartbreak at a time. 2 weeks later, the phone rang. The number was blocked. I almost ignored it. But something told me to answer. Mom. Her voice was softer than I remembered, thinner, cracked. Mom, please don't hang up. I just wanted to hear your voice. My throat tightened. How did you get this number? I told the warden it was urgent. I need to explain. Explain what, Vanessa? That you lied. That you forged my husband's will. That you threw me out like garbage. Mom, I was desperate, she said, crying now. Ethan convinced me. He said you'd waste the money, he said. Don't blame him, I snapped. You signed the papers. You looked me in the eyes while you destroyed everything. I know, she cried. And I hate myself for it. Mom, I don't sleep. I can't eat. Please, you're the only person who can help me. Help you how? I need a lawyer, a real one, someone who can appeal the case. Please, Mom, if you could just take some money from the estate. That was it. The moment the truth came out. Even now, her apology had a price tag. I cut her off. Vanessa, you're not calling to apologize. You're calling to use me again, and I'm done being used. Mom, please. I'll pray for you, I said quietly, but I will not rescue you. Then I hung up. The silence after that call was deafening. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the wall, tears burning behind my eyes. Because no matter how strong you think you are, walking away from your child, even when they're wrong, breaks something inside you. If you've ever had to choose peace over blood, type, I understand in the comments. Because peace always comes with a price. Weeks passed. The trial concluded. Vanessa was sentenced to 9 years in federal prison. Ethan 10. The papers called it justice. But to me, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like mourning. One afternoon, Carolyn stopped by with coffee. You've been quiet, she said softly. I'm tired, I admitted. I got everything back, but somehow I feel emptier than ever. She nodded. Justice doesn't heal the heart, Elaine. It just stops the bleeding. Her words lingered long after she left. That evening, I opened the box of letters I'd kept from Vanessa's childhood. Crayon drawings, birthday cards, Mother's Day notes. One had a stick figure, family, drawn in bright colors. Underneath, in crooked handwriting, she'd written, I love you, Mommy. You make me safe. I pressed that paper to my chest and sobbed. Because somewhere between that child and the woman she became, I'd lost her. And maybe, just maybe, she'd lost herself too. The next morning, I went to church for the first time in months. Not to pray for justice, but for peace. The pastor spoke about forgiveness, not as a gift for others, but as freedom for yourself. I sat there with tears in my eyes, realizing I built a fortress around my pain and called it protection. After the service, I stood outside, the sun warming my face, and whispered, "I forgive you, Vanessa." Not because she earned it, but because I needed to breathe again. If you're watching this right now, tell me in the comments, have you ever forgiven someone who never said sorry? Because that kind of forgiveness doesn't make you weak, it makes you whole. A week later, another letter arrived. This time, it wasn't begging. It was just one line, written in the same shaky handwriting. "Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on you." There were tear stains on the paper. And for the first time, I believed her. That night, I slept without nightmares. The next morning, I stood in the kitchen, sunlight streaming through the window, and made 2 cups of coffee, one for me, one for the ghost of the man who'd protected me even from beyond. I whispered, "Charles, she's learning. Maybe we all are." And then I smiled. Not because everything was perfect, but because, finally, I was free. Before you go, have you subscribed yet? Because this story isn't over. Sometimes redemption takes longer than punishment. And in the next part, you'll see how my daughter's final letter changed everything I thought I knew about forgiveness. Tell me where you're watching from, because I want to know how far a mother's love can travel, even when it's been broken and rebuilt. The morning started like any other. I made coffee, opened the curtains, and tried to fill the silence with the hum of ordinary life. But peace has a strange way of feeling temporary, like a house built on borrowed ground. Every time the mail truck stopped outside, my heart beat faster, half afraid, half expecting. And then, one cold Friday morning, it came again, another letter. Same handwriting. Same trembling curves in the ink. Only this time, the envelope wasn't plain. It was stamped with the prison's official seal, and the words approved correspondence. I held it for a long time before opening it. My hands shook, but not from anger. From something softer, something I couldn't name yet. When I finally tore it open, 3 pages fell out. Each one filled with small, neat writing. At the top of the first page, it read, "Mom, this isn't another apology. It's a confession." I froze. I've been seeing the prison counselor every week. They told me to write down every lie I told until I can't find any more to hide behind. But this one belongs to you. I sat down, breath catching. I didn't just forge Dad's will, Mom. I did something worse. I knew about his secret work before he died. My chest tightened. He told me everything 2 months before his heart attack. He said he was protecting the family, that some of the people he worked with weren't safe. He made me promise not to tell you. I thought I was helping. But when Ethan found out, he used that secret against me. He said if I didn't cooperate, he'd expose Dad's connections to the press and ruin his legacy. That's why I agreed to fake the documents. I wasn't just greedy, I was scared. I wanted to protect his name. I just lost control. I put the letter down and covered my face with both hands. It felt like every word was a door opening to a past I didn't want to revisit. I'd spent months hatting her, convincing myself she was nothing but cold and selfish. Now I saw the truth. She was weak, scared, and drowning. If you're still watching, tell me in the comments. Have you ever learned something that didn't excuse what someone did, but made you understand why they did it? Because understanding isn't the same as forgiving, but it's the first crack in the wall between hate and healing. I kept reading. Mom, the counselor says forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about remembering without breaking. I used to think love was something you could buy, control, or threaten. I was wrong. I see you now, the woman who never stopped believing in me, even when I gave her every reason to quit. I don't expect you to write back. I just needed to tell you the truth before I can face myself. At the bottom of the last page, she'd drawn a small heart. The same way she used to when she was little. That tiny shape undid me more than all the words on the page. I cried for a long time. Not the sharp, angry tears of betrayal, but the slow, cleansing kind that feel like rain after a drought. When I finally stopped, I folded the letter neatly and placed it beside Charles's photo. Then I whispered, "She's trying, Charles, maybe that's enough." For the next few weeks, I carried that letter everywhere, tucked inside my purse, hidden like a secret blessing. Whenever loneliness crept in, I'd take it out and read it again. Not because it erased what she did, but because it reminded me that even broken things can reach for the light. Then one afternoon, my phone rang. A familiar number. The prison. "Mrs. Whitmore," a voice said, "your daughter requested to add you to her visitation list. Would you like to approve it?" My mouth went dry. I didn't answer right away. Visiting her would mean looking at the same eyes that once lied to me, the same hands that signed away my home. But it would also mean seeing the little girl who drew hearts on paper and whispered, "I love you, Mommy." "Approve it," I said finally. The following Sunday, I drove 3 hours to the correctional facility. The road stretched long and quiet, flanked by barren trees and the kind of winter sky that feels too honest. Every mile felt like walking backward in time. When I entered the visitation hall, the air was cold and sterile. Rows of tables, families murmuring, guards watching. And then there she was. Vanessa. Thinner, paler. Her hair pulled back, her hands folded neatly on the table. When our eyes met, she stood too quickly, tears spilling before she could speak. I didn't move. I just stared, not at the prisoner, but at the child I once held through storms and fevers. "Mom," she whispered. My throat tightened. "Sit, sweetheart." She sat, trembling. "I didn't think you'd come." Neither did I. Silence stretched between us. And then quietly she said, "I'm sorry." I nodded slowly. "I know. I still have nightmares about what I did, about you standing there with your bags." "I do too," I said. Her eyes filled again. "I don't expect you to forgive me." I took a deep breath. "I already did." She blinked, confused. "When?" "The day I realized hatting you wasn't bringing me peace. You're my daughter, Vanessa. You broke me, but you're still mine." She covered her face and sobbed. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I reached across the table and took her hand. The guard watched, but I didn't care. Because in that moment, forgiveness stopped being an idea. It became something alive, something real. If you're still listening, take a moment right now. Think about the person who hurt you the most. What would happen if you stopped waiting for their apology and chose peace instead? Comment, "Peace begins with me," if you understand what I mean. When the guard announced visiting time was over, Vanessa looked up. "Can you come again?" she asked, voice small. "I will," I said, "but I want you to promise me something." "Anything." "When you get out, you start over. No lies, no shortcuts, no masks. You rebuild not for me, but for yourself." She nodded, wiping her tears. "I will." I stood, looking at her one last time through the glass partition as they led her away. She turned back, mouthed the words, "I love you." This time, I believed her. Driving home, the sky was streaked with pink and gold. The kind of sky Charles used to call second chances. And for the first time in years, I felt something warm settle inside me, not happiness, but peace. When I reached home, I placed Vanessa's letter inside a wooden box labeled, "For tomorrow." Because that's what forgiveness felt like now, not erasing the past, but protecting the future. Before I end this part, if you've stayed with me through this journey, thank you. Don't forget to subscribe, not for me, but for the stories that remind us that even the deepest scars can become lessons. Tell me in the comments, would you visit the person who betrayed you if they finally asked for forgiveness? Because the answer you give might reveal more about your heart than theirs. It had been exactly 1 year since I stepped into that cold visitation hall and held my daughter's trembling hands through the glass. A full year of letters, therapy, and slow forgiveness that still felt fragile, like porcelain held together by hope. The morning of her release was warm and golden. The kind of morning that makes you believe life gives second chances if you're brave enough to take them. I stood outside the prison gates holding a small bouquet of lilies, the same flowers I'd carried to her high school graduation 2 decades ago. When the heavy doors opened, she walked out wearing a plain gray coat, her hair tied back, her eyes hidden behind dark glasses. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she dropped her bag and ran straight into my arms. If you're watching this right now, tell me, have you ever hugged someone who once broke you, and somehow it felt like coming home anyway? Because that's what that moment felt like. Like the past wasn't gone, but maybe it could be rewritten. We drove home in silence. The city looked different, like it had grown older and wiser, or maybe that was just me. When we pulled into my driveway, Vanessa reached for my hand. "Mom," she whispered, "thank you for not giving up on me." I smiled faintly. "You gave me no choice. I wanted to see how your story ended." She laughed softly, the first real laugh I'd heard from her in years. But beneath that sound, there was still something unspoken, something that made the air heavier than it should have been. Inside the house, I'd prepared everything. Her old room freshly painted, her favorite meals simmering on the stove, a quiet welcome home. She walked through each room slowly, touching the walls, the furniture, the photographs. It felt like watching a ghost learn how to live again. That evening, as we sat at the dinner table, she pushed her plate away and said, "Mom, there's something you don't know." I froze. Those words, "there's something you don't know," had already changed my life once before. "Vanessa," I said carefully, "if this is about the past." "It's about the future," she interrupted, "and about Dad." I felt my heartbeat quicken. "Go on." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. "I found this," she said, placing it on the table. "It was hidden inside one of Dad's old safety deposit boxes under my name. The lawyer didn't know about it. I think he wanted me to find it when I got out." "What's on it?" She hesitated. "A message from him for both of us." I stared at that tiny piece of metal like it was alive. For months, I'd believed Charles's story was over, buried with all its secrets. But apparently, the dead still had one last move left in their game. We plugged it into my laptop. The screen flickered, and then his face appeared, older, softer, with that same calm voice I once trusted without question. "Elaine," he said, "if you're watching this, I'm gone. And if Vanessa with you, then life has found a way to bring you back together. But before you build your new beginning, you need to understand the truth about my ending." My stomach twisted. Charles leaned closer to the camera, his tone grave. "For years, I worked undercover for the Bureau. But in the last months of my life, I discovered something that changed everything. Someone inside the agency was leaking information to the very criminals we were investigating. I didn't know who to trust, so I left behind evidence, all of it. And Vanessa." My daughter flinched at her name. "You were part of my plan. I used your banking connections to hide information where the Bureau couldn't find it. I'm sorry for the burden that put on you. But I knew the only person ruthless enough to protect it, if it came to it, was you." I gasped. "Mom," Vanessa whispered, "he used me." Charles's recorded voice continued, his eyes weary but certain. "If either of you is watching this now, it means my gamble worked. You both survived the storm. The files you'll find on this drive belong to people who still have power, and they will come looking. Be careful who you trust." The video cut out. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Only the sound of the ceiling fan turning, slow and deliberate. "Mom," Vanessa whispered, "what if the people Dad warned us about are still out there?" I stared at the laptop, the frozen image of Charles's face. "Then he didn't just leave us a warning," I said quietly. "He left us a responsibility." She looked terrified. I reached across the table, took her hand. "We'll handle it together this time." If you've been following this story, pause for a second. What would you do if you discovered your loved one's final gift was also a danger? Would you open that door or lock it forever? Comment, I'd face it. If you believe the truth, no matter how dangerous, still deserves light. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Charles's voice in my head, the way he said, "They will come looking." Part of me wanted to destroy the drive, to burn it, erase it, pretend it never existed. But another part, the part of me that had learned strength through betrayal, couldn't. At dawn, I walked into my art studio, opened my sketchbook, and began to draw not a portrait this time, but a symbol. A chessboard with one missing queen, and a pawn standing in her place. Halfway through the drawing, I heard footsteps. Vanessa stood at the door, her hair messy, her eyes tired but calm. "Mom," she said, "there's a black car parked outside." I froze. How long has it been there? Since sunrise. We exchanged a look. The kind of look that doesn't need words. "Stay inside," I told her, walking to the window. The car engine idled, silent and patient. A man in a dark suit sat behind the wheel, wearing sunglasses even though the sky was gray. My pulse quickened. Vanessa whispered, "What if it's them? Or what if it's someone who finally wants to finish what your father started?" I said, my voice steady. She clutched my hand. "What do we do?" I smiled faintly, the same way Charles used to before every difficult decision. "We do what Whitmores always do," I said. "We face it." I stepped out onto the porch, the cool morning air wrapping around me. The man stepped out of the car and raised a badge, FBI. "Mrs. Whitmore," he called, "I believe you have something that belongs to us." I smiled thinly. "That depends on who you're really working for." He paused, studying me. "Your husband was right. You're smarter than people give you credit for." The tension hung like thunder in the air. Vanessa appeared at the doorway, clutching the flash drive. "Mom." I turned to her. "Give it to me." She hesitated. Then, slowly, she walked forward and placed the drive in my palm. I looked at the agent. "If this contains the truth Charles died for, I'm not handing it over until I know it won't disappear again." He nodded once. "Fair enough. But you should know, you're not the only one looking for it." As his car drove away, dust rising behind him, Vanessa exhaled shakily. "Mom, are we in danger again?" I looked at her, my daughter, my betrayer, my redemption. And for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt purpose. "Maybe," I said softly, "but this time we're not running." That night, I opened the drive. Inside were hundreds of encrypted files, names, accounts, evidence that could topple powerful people. At the bottom, one final document, a letter titled for Elaine and Vanessa. It read, "My queens, if you found this, then the game isn't over, it's yours now. Don't play for revenge, play for justice." I looked at Vanessa, tears in both our eyes. "Looks like your father just gave us our next move," I whispered. And for the first time, she smiled, not with guilt or fear, but strength. "So if you're still here, thank you. You've walked this entire journey with me, from betrayal to forgiveness, from ashes to armor. Tell me in the comments, if life handed you one last secret, would you expose it or protect it? And before you go, don't forget to subscribe. Because this story isn't over yet."